Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I'm Utpala, and we are starting our third week of classes on Foundation Course 8, Death and the Realms of Existence. So before we get started, let's take a moment or two and get very clear about our motivation for taking this course and for being here today. So we're learning not only about what kind of worlds, if you will, that exist and what kind of beings we could become, what the karma is to be a certain type of being. We do this, learn this not only so that we're aware of what activities will lead to realms of existence that in which it would be impossible to practice the Dharma. What those worlds look like, what those lives look like. So we learn it not only for ourselves, as motivation for ourselves to be more aware about our own behavior, but also so that we know what kind of beings exist in the universe. If we do have the motivation to not only get out of the cycle of suffering ourselves, but to reach a state where we could benefit all living beings, the countless numbers of them. Well, now we're learning who those beings are, what their lives are like, what their suffering is like. So it can be a motivation for us to be even more serious about our practice, more diligent. So many beings are waiting for us. Sashi Puki Tukshing Meto Tram Rira Lingshi Nyende Kempadi Sangye Shingdu Mikte Uwaki Jokun Namdak Shingla Tuparsho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayam Sangye Chiran Soki Chuknam La Changchu pardu dakni kyapsuchi. Daki chishegi pesanam ki. Jola pinshir sangye juparsho. Sangye churan soki chuknam la. Jangchu pardu dakni kyapsuchi. Daki chishegi pesanam ki. Jola pinshir sangye juparsho. Sangye churan soki chuknam la. Jangchu pardu dakni kyapsuchi. Daki chisheki pesanam ki. Chola pinshir sangye juparsho. So thank you for your interest in this course. Thank you for coming today. Thank you, live translators, for making it possible for this course to occur. So does anyone have any questions from what we've covered so far? Okay, you suspicious ones. Let's go on to class 5. Today, we're going to talk about beings in the intermediate state. Sorry, just organizing things. Get you in front of me. There we go. Okay, so they're called, or that both the realm and the beings in the realm are called Pardo. Pardo. Bar means in between, between. And we talked about it a little bit before, but it's between the death of one life and the birth of the next life. That's Pardo. Sometimes Pardo can be talking about the beings who live in the state of Pardo, in the intermediate state. And sometimes it can refer to the realm itself. The beings who are in this state, I'd like to think of it as a state, even though it is physical and it's a place, like we live in a place in the desire realm. Bardo beings live in a place that's the Bardo realm, but their physicality is very slight, and we'll learn more about that. But the beings who live there, they're called Pardoa. Pardoa. And they're also known by other names. One of the other names is Parsi. Parsi. And Bar again means in between. And Si means existence or life. So Barsi is the life in between. And I think we also talked about this one before about, but maybe not the Tibetan phrase. They're known as Drisa. Drisa. Dri means smell, and sa means to eat. Smell eaters. So all these three terms, Bardua, Parsi, and Drisa, or intermediate being, the life in between, and smell eaters, are all referring to the same kind of being. The material for this class on the intermediate beings comes from the commentary by Gyalwa Gendin Drup. And we've used his commentary before in earlier classes. So you remember that he was a student of Tsongkhapa. And he wrote many books. Now, Pardo beings, there have been a lot of corruptions around the teachings on beings in the Pardo. So it's important that we're using a text by an author who is well regarded and is of some esteem. He's reliable as an author. He's commenting on Master Vasubandhu, who is also a very reputable author, scholar, practitioner. There have been some weird, sort of strange books about Pardo. One of them is called Pardo Tudro, or in English, it's called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And this is actually, it was very popular when I was first getting interested in Buddhism. And I got this book and started reading it. And what I've learned is that it's got a lot of erroneous material in it. So in our lineage of teachings, through Geshe Michael Roach, through Ken Rinpoche, Losang Tarchen, through Pabonka Rinpoche, and up through to Tsongkhapa and beyond. We don't use this text in discussing about death and discussing about what it's like in that period of time in between death and rebirth. And this is just brings up an opportunity to talk about being very careful about who we accept as a teacher of the Dharma. because we can be easily led astray from the teachings. One of the things that very much impressed me about Geshe Michael Roach is his connection to authentic teachings. All of the readings that we have are in source language. You notice in his books, if you have the opportunity to get any of them, that he's quite like fastidious about using footnotes and showing where he got the information that he got. And I think it's important that we investigate who we receive teachings from to make sure that they are that they know what they're talking about, you know. Oh, so Cherry, I read it so many years ago. We're talking over 30 years ago, and I didn't read the whole thing. So I'm sorry, I don't have any specific points that I can raise for you. I don't know. Someday, if I have a lot of time, I may, check it out of the library and take another look to see what is wrong. This is what Geshe Michael has said about the book. So personally, I trust him. So Master Vasubandhu, in his book, the Abhidharma Kosha, was collecting all the teachings of the Buddha. So, we've got 3 steps there. We've got the Buddha speaking. We've got Master Vasubandhu commenting on the Buddhist teachings. And then we've got Gyalwa Genden Dru commenting on Master Vasubandhu. So just by way of reminder, we are in if we look at the different philosophical schools of Buddhism, we are in the detailist or Vaibhashika school. That's where the Abhidharma is. There are other teachings about the Pardo that if you enter the Diamond Way, there are tantric texts that are related to the Pardo. And just while I mentioned the Diamond Way, Geshe Michael will be giving a transmission in October. And if you have interest to enter the Diamond Way, they're still accepting registrations for receiving that transmission. And it's going to be done all around the world at the same time. People gathering together in different locations around the world. So travel and visas won't be an issue, hopefully. So everything that we're going to talk about today is straight from Vasubandhu, Master Vasubandhu. So the first thing to talk about is how intermediate beings are born. And we talked about different kinds of birth in a previous class. And one of them was zuke. Zuke. Does anybody remember what zuke is? It means miraculous birth, but what that means is that you take birth, as a complete being. Like you're not an infant that has to suckle and so on. You're born being able to, get up and walk around. So that's how pardos, or intermediate beings, are born. After they die in that life, then boom, they're reborn as a being in this intermediate state. Tzu means miraculous, and Kie is born. Now, Master Vasubandhu goes through an exercise of proving the existence of intermediate beings. Now, generally speaking, as we talked about before, we can't see them. I mean, if you are, as I am, an ordinary being, I have not seen an intermediate being. I haven't had, I don't have any memory of being in the Bardo realm, and so I don't have any memory of being one or seeing one. So it's very common in Tibetan texts, in their commentaries, that things are proved in two different ways. One is lung, which is the second one, but it always comes first for some reason. And one is rikpa. So lung means scriptural authority. So an author will show how, in the case that we're working on here, Gyalwag and Drup will call on Master Vasubandhu, who is in turn quoting Shakyamuni Buddha. And then Rikpa is logic, which is what we, in our current times, that's what we think of in terms of proof, is use of logic. And you'll often see the two together, this pattern of setting forth proofs in a text. Lungrik. So we're going to start off with logical proofs. Rikpa. So this is a quotation here from the Abhidharma Kosha. Zhi Jin Dang Chi Tun Chir Si Ba Che Le Jung Wa Yu Min. 《 Zhi Jun Dang Chi Tun Qie, si ba che le jung wa yu min. 《 Zhi Jun Dang Chi Tun Qie, si ba che le jung wa yu min. 《 Zhi Jun Dang Chi Tun Qie, si ba che le jung wa yu min. 《 Zhi Jun Dang Chi Tun Qie, si ba che le jung wa yu min. And what these lines are talking about is Drew. Drew means a grain, like a grain of rice, or it could mean a kernel, like a kernel of corn. Um, so it's a grain. Gyun is a stream or a continuum. And this logical proof is, or in these lines, this part of the proof is showing us an example, using the metaphor of a grain, the continuation of a grain. And what this is referring to is taking as a metaphor, taking a look at a seed for a tree. The seed, as it continues on, it doesn't like in an instant just transform into being a tree. At first, there's a little shoot that comes out of the dirt, you know, a little shoot, and then a couple little leaves. Usually there's two that appear at a time. And that, so it grows into a sprout. And then that sprout continues to grow, and it grows into a tree. So a seed can't become a tree unless it's gone through this process. So there's a process in between seed and tree, as our example. So what does this have to do with the bardo? So if we look at when someone who dies in let's say in New York City, and who's going to take rebirth as a human in Ho Chi Minh City. So in between, that death, when the person dies in New York, they've got to get to Ho Chi Minh City, the place where they will be reborn. So the death is the seed, and the tree is the rebirth. And yeah, no visa required. The tree is the rebirth in Ho Chi Minh. So during this period of the Pardo, there has to be this sprout, and this sprout represents the intermediate being. So Master Vasubandhu is not trying to prove rebirth or reincarnation. He's assuming that you already accept the idea of rebirth, so that you already understand that that there's no end to the stream of mind, right? There's no beginning and no end. And we're talking about that period of time in between rebirths. So therefore, he says, Bardo must exist. So this is challenging for some of us to accept, especially if we don't yet accept the idea of rebirth, right? This idea of the Bardo must exist. And if you are one who has not yet accepted future lives, then you can hold all of this lightly, and continue. Yes, he assumes we've done ACI 4 and that we've already used that course to prove to ourselves the existence of future lives. But that's not his topic. But anyway, so hold it lightly, and it's something that listen, and come back to it over time. Things, at least in my experience of learning the Buddha's teachings, sometimes you just have to put it on the shelf. And then when I come back to it later, it makes a lot more sense to me because of other studies I've done, other practices I've done. So another reason he doesn't talk about it is that, that's Master Dharmakirti's main thing is logic, right? So he's just trying to prove, Master Vasubandhu is, that between dying in New York City and being reborn in Ho Chi Minh City, there has to be an intermediate step where we actually travel to Ho Chi Minh City. And this is called Chele Jungwa. Chele Jungwa. This ends in min. So someone comes and says, like, well, can't you just, die and then instantaneously be reborn in Ho Chi Minh City? Why? It just should be so easy. And he says, min, which means no. Chepa, here in this phrase, chele jungwa, chepa means to cut off, to discontinue, and jungwa means to like come into being. So, and sipa, as we had before, is life. So he's saying, it's not that life ends and immediately is reborn. It doesn't immediately show up somewhere else. So someone says to him in his text, Well, why isn't it like a mirror? Like an image in a mirror. Suknyen means a reflection in a mirror, that thing that's reflected. And no, I'm sorry. Suknyen is the reflection. And Che Shin is, shall we say, the original of what is being reflected in the mirror, the source of the reflection. So this person is saying, why isn't it like a reflection in a mirror? You walk into your room, there's a mirror on the wall, and boom, there's the reflection. It's not like you have to do anything special. You don't need any time for the reflection to show up, as long as you've got a nice as long as you've got a nice mirror, something that is reflective, then you will have a reflection. But Master Vasubandhu says that's not a very good example to use. It's not a good metaphor when we're talking, we're talking about a continuum of a we call it a person, even though we're taking on new types of life, right? But it's the continuation of our mind over vast amounts of time, and the different bodies we take on. So there's like no continuation of that type between me in front of a mirror and the mirror. It's there are two conditions. There's the condition of me being an object, me being the chashin, the thing that is reflected, and what appears in the mirror, the suknyan, the reflection of me. It's not one continuous thing, it's two different things. I don't fit in the mirror. Well, my mirror is only this big, so it only shows part of me. Also, the mirror is an object that exists independent of me, the the one who is reflected in the mirror. So we are two different objects. The person, in my case, in the mirror. And we can't occupy the same space at the same time. I mean, my hands can't even occupy the same space at the same time, right? They block each other from occupying the same space. So it's not the person in the mirror. That's not the continuum of the person. It's just a reflection. And then the second problem that Master Vasubandhu has with the use of this kind of metaphor is that it's not caused, the reflection in the mirror is not caused by the previous moment of me, the person in front of the mirror. Um, it's a circumstance where colors and shapes, an object, uh, a person is standing in front of a mirror, and what's reflected are colors and shapes. So the person, it is not a cause for the colors and shapes, the reflection in the mirror. The reflection in the mirror is caused by a person standing in front of the mirror, and the mirror being having the properties such that it can reflect what is in front of it. The cause of me standing in front of the mirror is the me of the moment before I arrived in front of the mirror. So Master Vasubandhu says that that example, that metaphor, it is not a good one to use when we're talking about the intermediate state between death and rebirth. So now we turn to scriptural proofs. Lung. The first one to talk about is from a book called Sipa Dun Tempe Do. Sipa Dun Tempe Do. Sipa again means life or existence, or in this case, it means a kind of existence, a kind of being. Dun means seven. So seven types of beings. Tempa means to teach. And do means sutra. Excuse me. So this is Master Vasubandhu quotes from a sutra by Shakyamuni Buddha called the Sutra that teaches the seven types of beings. And among those seven are beings in the intermediate state, Bardo beings. Now, the thing about using quotations from a book is that, the person that if you're debating, the person you're debating with, or if you're, even if you're in a book club and you're talking about a book, you all agree that that's the book you're talking about. You agree that that's the authoritative source for your conversation about what the book is about. So using a sutra is valid to use with those who accept sutras as being authoritative, right? You wouldn't use this as a proof with someone who, has never has no interest in Buddhism or has never heard of the Buddha, or you know um but I think Master Vasubandhu realized that who would be reading his books, and the reason why he wrote the books was to was as a service to those who are interested in learning about what the Buddha taught. So yeah, we wouldn't use this as a proof with people who are not Buddhists. And we would use it as a proof if we're talking with friends who are also on the path, putting the teachings into practice. And we can say, oh, yeah, in this sutra, it talks about 7 types of beings, to someone who has maybe not yet studied the Bardo. So just a little aside there. So remember we talked about 5 types of beings before. Hell realm beings, craving spirits, human beings, animals, human beings, and pleasure beings. So that's only 5. Why does the Buddha say 7 and not 5? Because he's including, remember we talked about demigods, those pleasure beings who are not quite the perfect kind of pleasure being. They're very jealous of those who are. And then Pardo beings, those beings who are in between births as one of the other types of being, except for one. Do you remember? Pardo beings, there's not a Pardo being for being born into the formless realm, because there's nothing to be born into, right? The formless realm, for a person who has created the causes for the formless realm, that occurs in the exact same location they are in when they passed away. So if they passed away in New York City, that's where their formless realm is. But everybody else goes through the Pardo realm before their next rebirth. So that's why the Buddha said 7. So there's another sutra that Master Vasubandhu quotes that gives 3 conditions for a human being to enter a womb, the mother's womb. So 3 conditions have to be present. The first condition is called Marung Datsen Den. Marung Datsen Den. Marung, ma is sometimes a negative particle, meaning, not or un or something like that. But here, ma means mother. And rung means suitable or fit. So fit to be a mother, suitable to be a mother. Datsen den. Da, that means month. Sen, if you're at Mixed Nuts, you know, we talked about this in our recent classes, what sen means. It means a mark or an indicator. And den means to possess or to have. So a person who's suitable to be a mother, who has the mark of the month, the sign of the month. And what that means is that she's still menstruating. She still has monthly cycles. In other words, you know, otherwise, I mean, that, you know, if she's not menstruating, there's no egg there being ready to be inseminated. So a woman who's suitable to be a mother and is still menstruating. That's the first condition. Then the second condition is Pama Chakshing Trepa. Pama Chakshing Trepa. Pama means father and mother. It's actually the same in English. Pa and ma. Chak means desire. And this is referring to the desire of the father and mother, the desire that they have for each other. Shing, sorry, is and trepa means sexual contact. So they have desire for each other and have sexual contact. Now we know that unfortunately there's a situation where some women who are suitable to be a mother, who do have the monthly sign, who are sexually violated and become impregnated. And there's no desire there. So I think what the Buddha, I mean, this is just my thought, that he was talking about, you know, the normal state of affairs for human beings when, you know, it's in all of our cultures. We grow up, we want to meet someone who we can live our life with, and we can make children with, we can have children with. And that's like the normal course for the vast majority of people. Not all of us, but most of us. There's desire between the two. So that's the second cause. The third cause is drisa nepa. Drisa nepa. And drisa we just had, right? Drisa. The smell eater. Nepa means in the immediate vicinity, close nearby. very close. So when the Buddha was speaking about this, he said that there had to be, a woman who's fit to be a mother. There had to be desire between that woman and the man who would become the father. And there must be sexual activity. And there must be an intermediate being very close nearby. So why this is a proof is that it's just the fact that the Buddha was talking about these kinds of beings, right? So him talking about this kind of being is a kind of proof, scriptural proof, that intermediate beings exist. Another scriptural proof is Pardor Dawa. Pardor Dawa. This is Pardo with a little ra suffix. It's a grammatical particle in between Bardo and Dawa. Dawa means to excuse me. Dawa means to pass beyond. And what this refers to is Nyangen Le Depa. This is the Da and Nyangen Le Depa, which is nirvana, the state of nirvana, to have passed beyond grief. So this is referencing someone who goes beyond sorrow, who becomes an arhat in the Bardo state. That's what that ra is in. So there are, generally speaking, and we're not going to go through them all, that's in another course, 5 situations, 5 ways that we can become an arhat. And one of them is Pardor Dawa. One of them is that we can enter nirvana while we are in the Pardo. And this was also taught by the Buddha. So it's good to give a little pep talk at this point. Like you can think, oh, why don't I reach nirvana after I'm dead? But we have this situation right now that is so rare. A human being who has intelligence, who has an interest in the teachings, who is not experiencing so much suffering, immense suffering in every moment, like happens for hell beings or spirit beings or animals. Our suffering is a different flavor. It allows us to still think. And we don't have so much pleasure that we're just zoned out on being beautiful all the time and, going to the best movies, eating the best chocolate, we have this mix of suffering and pleasure, where we can see that, oh, pleasure doesn't last. We're just in a very unique and rare position to be able to practice. And this is the state, the one we're in right now, where normally they say this is where the state you need to be in to practice the Dharma. So it would have to be, the chance that we could attain nirvana, that we could reach nirvana if we're practicing well. If we're meditating every day, if we're contemplating the teachings, we can see emptiness directly and work through. I mean, normally they say 7 lifetimes, but how do we know which lifetime we're in? Maybe this is the 7th. And the chance that we could be the kind of Bardo being, the kind of intermediate being who attains enlightenment in the Bardo, or attains nirvana in the Bardo, is probably even more rare than becoming a human. One more scriptural proof, and this is called Samme. Samme. We talked about this if you've taken other courses with me. Usually this phrase is Samme nga, which is the 5 immediate misdeeds. So Samme are the immediate misdeeds. Immediate meaning that when the deed is so horrific or creates so much negative karma, plants so many negative seeds, that they're going to ripen into being pushed into birth in the lowest hell immediately after death. So tsamme means immediate or uninterrupted, literally uninterrupted. So if someone asks, well, what about, is there a bardo for someone who has done one of these 5 negative deeds? They are just quickly killing your father, killing your mother, killing an arhat, trying to draw blood from a Buddha, and splitting the Sangha. So they're very specific. And in fact, we can't do the last one because the Sangha has to be the monastics who are around the Buddha who is in this world. So we actually can't do the last 2. With the caveat that we don't know who is an enlightened being and who isn't. So best not to draw blood from anyone. So what about someone who commits one of those five? Is there an intermediate state for them between this human life they were in and their life in the lowest hell? When we talk about the bardo, and this may seem like semantics, but it just is the way it's talked about. When we say immediate rebirth in the lowest hells, we're talking about, of the five kinds of beings, right? Hell beings, hungry spirits, animals, humans, and pleasure being. Of those five types, will have an immediate rebirth as a hell being in the lowest hell. So we're not talking about the seven when we talk about what happens to someone who's committed one of these five. We're talking about the five types of rebirth. So yes, they go through the pardo on their way to hell. The karma that, and this is talked about in Shuang-Sung's Tower translation classes. Su Geng has a text on the Wheel of Life. And we have been spending a lot of time on this particular part of the wheel between, the karma that creates the next life is the same one that creates the bardo being on the way to the next life. So that's one karma pushing that whole movement from, for example, being a human being, dying, and then being pushed into the bardo being, and then out as human, rebirth as a human, or in the hells, if you've done one of the five immediate misdeeds. So those were our scriptural authority that Master Vasubandhu presents. Got a question here. So there's no guide during this intermediate state, and the soul just experiences what it has to experience, and any being that the soul meets is a projection from itself. So right now we're wearing the hat of the detailist philosophical school. And while the Abhidharma talks about hallucinations, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, but talks about hallucinations that occur in the bardo realm, it's not talking about them in the same way that the consequence branch of the middle way talks about how things are our projection, that everything is our projection. But yeah, if we take off the Abhidharma hat and put on the consequence branch hat, everything is a projection. Every instant of this class is just our projection. There's nothing solid or that has any identity on which we are projecting our mental images. they're all ripening of karma into mental images. And now whether there's a guide or not, like I've never really heard, this isn't like talked about in the text that I've studied, but in different teachers that I've had over the years, I have met teachers who say that they have the ability to reach those kind of beings, and we're going to get into, whether you can see a Bardo being later on. The text does talk about seeing other Bardo beings, but that there are some teachers who are so advanced in their practice that they can go to different realms and teach people. So it could be possible that that a person like that could meet a Bardo being and guide them in some way. And you'll see in the reading, the experience of a Bardo being is not necessarily pleasant. There was a lot going on in the process of dying that was terrifying. And to slip from this life, having a really terrifying experience, into the intermediate realm, like those terrifying kinds of experiences are likely to continue. But to have someone, let's say you have a teacher who's quite realized, let's say that you've been practicing, you've entered the Diamond Way and you've been doing practices, and it could be that your teacher comes in, like taps you on the shoulder and says, remember to think like this. But other than that, I haven't really seen this talked about in any open text. Buddhism doesn't even talk about a soul. I think a soul is a Judeo-Christian idea, that there's some ineffable part of us that exists and like from the Christian point of view, that can go to heaven or to hell. Some Christian religions into an in-between state, purgatory. But that's where your soul goes. I mean, the Buddhists, they don't talk about anything like that. It's moments of awareness, a stream of moments of awareness. So there's like nothing there, but moments of awareness experienced in a stream. I hope that's helpful. There must be a soul, even if it doesn't say it, right? No, if there is that ineffable eternal self that goes through transmigration, like it doesn't matter if it's called a soul or not, but it is the language we use in the West. I was thinking about the diamond, for example, is never talked about in the diamond cutter. Um, Actually, I think this is talked about explicitly in the philosophical texts. There is no self that exists independent of our projections. Um, and I kind of equate self with soul. This idea of a self. Like, I don't know about you, but as I get older, especially, and like this bag of skin and bones it's starting to fall apart and be very different than it was when I was, 30. But I still feel like I'm me. I inside I feel like I'm me and I haven't changed. Like that idea is a false one. And I think that that's the equation to soul. But I don't know. Um, I've never really heard a soul described in a way that the way that I could accept um, as being something that existed, because I can't open myself up and find it. So Master Vasubandhu, in his proving about, or his offering of proofs about the existence of intermediate beings, he uses logic and he uses scriptural authority. He doesn't say, "Oh, I've seen Pardo beings. I've been there." And he doesn't do that because it's, number one, not something that we can verify that he actually did see it or not. And number two, we don't know enough about him. Like around the Shakyamuni Buddha, we have those of us who have studied for a while and have taken different teachings, and been exposed to those teachings. We can see that there's an internal consistency, and there's he is reliable and authentic. Uh, and we don't know that about Master Vasubandhu. We have some of his writings which are brilliant, um, but he's not as well talked about as the Buddha is. So we can't rely on that. So now, oh, next, Master Vasubandhu talks about different characteristics or features of intermediate beings. And the first is, what do Bardo beings look like? Their physical appearance, their body is made of a very subtle physical matter. And the way it appears matches the kind of being that the Bardo being is going to be reborn as. So, if a person, for example, has done one of the 5 immediate misdeeds, they're a human being, they die, they enter the Bardo and they appear as a hell being. And it's the reason why they appear that way is that, as I was talking about, it's that same karma. This karma is pushing life through this intermediate state and into being reborn in another state. So that karma first ripens as this very subtle form of a hell being. Then he talks about the color of intermediate beings. The scriptures say that a person who is headed towards rebirth in the hell realms has the color of like a scorched piece of wood, a burnt piece of wood. For animals, someone who's going to be reborn in the animal realm, they have a sort of grayish, smoky gray color. For creating spirits, they have the color of water, which I guess means translucent. Pleasure being someone who's going to be reborn as a pleasure being or human, they have a golden color and they look like young kids, like 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. Someone who's being born as I misspoke there. So you remember we talked about different kinds of pleasure beings? So I just wanted to be clear. I didn't quite misspeak, but if someone's going to be reborn as a pleasure being in the desire realm, they will have a golden color. If they're headed towards rebirth as a pleasure being in the form realm, then they're white and they're also an adult. And they also have clothes on. Now, how long do Bardo beings live? There's a debate in the Abhidharmakosha. There's a scholar named Vasumitra who also wrote a commentary to Master Vasubandhu's book. And what he says is that a Bardo being lives for 7 days, that their maximum lifetime is 7 days. And you start the day of death is day 1. And that's the maximum amount. And then the shortest amount is, like a few seconds long. Then there's this idea that if you haven't taken rebirth into into where your karma is pushing you, like if your karma is pushing you to be reborn as a human, if at 7 days you haven't yet taken rebirth as a human, then your pardo being, your life as a pardo being dies, and you're immediately reborn as another pardo being. So, and they say that can happen 7 times. So the real maximum length of time in the pardo is 49 days. And if it is 49 days, then it was 7 instances of being a bardo being. I hope that makes sense. There are some prayers that people do with loved ones who have passed, and special prayers that are written to do for people who have passed. And like one of my dear friend Rebecca Vinicor, she has a relationship with Sarah May monastery in India, which is where Geshe Michael went. And she gathers information from people about the person who's died, and collects offerings, and then asks the monks there at Sarah May to do the ritual prayers for the person in the bardo realm. And there's certain prayers that you do over time. So who can see intermediate beings? Could we ever get to a point where we could see a pardo being? And the Buddha says that you have to have, play chin. Pla, we've had before. That's the word for a pleasure being. Also, the word for a deity is a hla. And then chen in this spelling means eye. Now, I pointed to my eyeball, but it's not really talking about a particular kind of eyeball. It's talking about the divine eye, or the eye of the gods, or something like that. It's talking about a way of seeing. So when we advance through our meditation practice, we get certain abilities. And one of them is to have this kind of sight. And it's not that, a new eyeball shows up somewhere on your head. It's that you meet those beings. I'm not sure if it is in meditation, or outside of meditation. Like when I talked about before about a teacher who, excuse me, who could see craving spirits. He came to Diamond Mountain and walked around Diamond Mountain and pointed out, oh, craving spirits are living there. He could see them. So he was walking around, and he could see them. So maybe it's not just in meditation, but it is considered a certain type of sight that comes from being a deep meditator. The reading for this class talks about 11 impediments or obstacles towards that would prevent us from getting this kind of sight, this kind of divine eye. But I'm not going to go through them all. You can see them in the reading, and they're related to obstacles to meditation. So they are closely linked. So if we eliminate those 11 obstacles and we get the divine eye, then we can see those kinds of beings. Also, part of beings who are of the same type, in other words, intermediate beings who are headed to the same realm, like all the intermediate beings who are going to be born as a craving spirit, all the intermediate beings who are going to be reborn as an animal, and so on. Each of them can see each other in that group. So people on the way to craving spirit realm, they can see each other. But you can't see, they can't see the ones who are headed to the human realm, and they can't see the ones who are headed to the hell realm. Now, Master Vasubandhu talks about miraculous powers of intermediate beings. They can fly. They can travel really long distances very quickly. Like they can get from New York City to Ho Chi Minh City like that. They say, the scriptures say that they can pass through walls. So their bodies must, if two things can't occupy the same space at the same time, in order for the being to go through the wall, their body would have to be such that it can get in between all the cells in the wall or something like that, right? Like an X-ray can go through clothing, right? So their body must be like, I'm thinking, this is me thinking, must be that kind of energy that can find the spaces in between the cells of something solid. That to us is solid, like a wall. They say that there are only two kinds of things that intermediate being can't pass through. One of them is the spot where Shakyamuni Buddha became enlightened under the Bodhi tree, the Vajrasana. We talked about that. And then the other is that they can't pass through the tissue of their mother's womb. So once they see Pa and Ma having desire for each other and having sex, and they enter their mother's womb, once they get there, they're trapped. They can't pass back out. They're stuck, and they're going to have that rebirth. Whether that infant or fetus even becomes a born baby, that's their karma as well, whether that happens. So there's those two things those two types of material that an intermediate being cannot pass through. Intermediate beings eat food. Remember, they're called smell eaters, right? So they eat very, very subtle things. And we'll talk more about that later this week. Some scriptures talk about what their form looks like other than its color or its type. Like intermediate beings on their way to the hell realms are upside down. And beings who are headed to the form realm are like facing up. The reading you can read the reading. It's a long reading, but has a lot of details. So this moment about of being caught in the mother's womb, it's based on a chinchilokpa, which means a kind of hallucination. They see something as being very pleasurable, but it's painful for them to enter that womb and then be stuck. So it's a misperception that they have, this chinchilokpa. Okay, that is all the content from this class. Does anybody have any questions before we close up? Oh, great. I'm glad it's interesting. It is fascinating to think about all the different types of life forms there are and the different ways that beings exist, because I take my experiences like this is the way life is. That I can walk upright and I can see certain things and I can hear certain sounds and feel certain things where they're unique to the kind of being I am. So it expands my idea of what life may be like for other types of beings. Great. So if you would like to join me, we can do the concluding prayers together. So to think about all the, the past 70 minutes and time spent here learning about these teachings, thinking about them. It's a very expensive karma to be in a Dharma class. In other words, we have to have created so many powerful, good seeds to have the experience of a Dharma class. So now that we've spent these good seeds, let's plant some more good seeds by rejoicing about having been here in this class with all these people from around the world, from rejoicing about the translators who make it possible to understand what's being said. Rejoice about living in a world where the Buddha came and taught and where the teachings still exist. And living in a world where someone, Geshe Michael Roach, gathered these teachings together to present them in a way that's easy for us to digest. So it's really quite amazing and wonderful. So plant these seeds towards reaching your highest goal. Sashi Buki Jukshin Meto Tram Rira Blingshi Ninde Genpati Sangye Shindu Mite Owarki Jokun Namdak Shingla Tuparsho Idam Guru Ratamandala Kamnirya Dayami Ewadi Kyoku Tsunam Yeshe Toksokshi Tsunam Yeshe Lejunwe Dampar Kunyi Topar Sho. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest. Thank you, live translators. Have a good couple of days, and I'll see you on Friday.